Hi, in this video, we'll discuss insurance for federally qualified health centers, also known as community health centers. Hi, I'm Brian Mahon, founder and CEO of Igloo Insurance, where we offer transparent risk advice to business and families. Now, federally qualified health centers, FQHCs, or community health centers, these are organizations, often nonprofits in your local community who do critical work in the healthcare industry. Often it's pediatrics, primary care, women's health typically are government subsidized and help a lot of lower income families. They face unique risks, particularly since the COVID-19 pandemic, and their funding is also at risk. So here's everything you need to know about FQHCs and the insurance and risk implications they have. First and foremost, there's workers' compensation risks, right? They have nurses administering needle sticks during vaccinations to minors and adult patients, or maybe combative patients may have some mental health illness. There's also slips and falls, getting supplies out of the supply closet, or just minor injuries like bumping your head. A lot of these community health centers also have mobile care vans where they travel around their community. Could be to a migrant farm or maybe to a local school or just a local community event, but they operate these mobile clinics for, vaccines or outreach to administer care. So obviously over the road or driving exposures are there. Want to make sure you have drivers who have a good background of good driving history, no DUIs. Maybe they take some driver safety courses throughout the year. Another major exposure is professional liability. Federally qualified health centers are unique where they are covered by the Federal Tort Claims Act for medical malpractice and professional liability. But you have to be careful because there's very strict guidelines on what falls into that and what doesn't. And what I've seen working with about half a dozen community health centers in my area here in Pennsylvania. Sometimes subcontracted physicians are left out of that government immunity. Sometimes infectious disease specialists or sports medicine specialists or even some behavioral health specialists or subcontracted dental teams could be excluded from the Federal Tort Claims Act, and thus you need a gap liability or gap professional medical malpractice professional liability policy, which we specialize in here at Igloo. There's often property exposures with community health centers. They have not small, but uh, sometimes older buildings they're occupying in older towns, or maybe they're in rural areas where there's not fire departments and access to respond to a property loss quickly, where you would in kind of a more urban area. Owning property is common with community health centers. You have to be careful with maintaining them, the roof, the mechanicals, the HVAC systems, and that they're well lit. Handrails are everywhere. That the building is upkept as much as possible. Most community health centers work in pediatrics, so abuse and molestation coverage is something that's often overlooked and a big exposure as well. So these coverage areas we'll dive into a little bit deeper. So for workers' comp, it's really rated off a few factors. Number one is your payroll. What are you paying folks and how much of them are on staff? What are they doing? Are they office clerical folks, or are they, under that physician doctor's code? So the clerical office has less exposure with it. What have your claims been? Really identified by your experience mod or X mod. So you should be keeping track of that trend. One needle stick claim or fall can change your premiums pretty fast, jacking up that experience mod. All of these carriers also have different writing companies. Ocean Carrier, let's say, is the name of the carrier, and then they have the river writing company, the pond writing company, and the stream writing company, kind of their high, middle, and low tiers. That's something you have to be mindful of with workers' comp. And then underwriters can also add credits, which brokers can often negotiate. Some states you can negotiate a higher rate, sometimes you can't. If your workers' compensation premiums are higher than typical, there's a few levers you can pull there, as well as a lot of states like Pennsylvania, where I live, has a safety committee program where you can get a 5% discount regardless of broker, regardless of carrier, which is a really nice program. Business auto, you don't want to assume, personal vehicles are covered just because reimburse mileage to employees. You want to look out for hired and non-owned auto liability, even if you don't have mobile vans or owned vehicles at your community health center. So what hired means is rental cars, right? And non-owned is mainly referring to your employees' personal cars. Someone's, running out to the post office, they're running out to, I don't know, drop off a check or do something for work during the workday, and they get into an accident. It's likely their personal auto insurance will deny that claim and say, hey, well, you were on company time, and you need to submit this claim to your employer. That's where a non-owned auto liability exposure comes up. Again, professional liability, medical malpractice. Don't assume everybody's covered. You want to look at the contracts you have with local schools or whoever. Look at your physician's list, how many hours a week they're working, if they're full-time or part-time, W-2 or contracted. Fill out a Federal Tort Claims Act gap liability application, and you can kind of analyze that exposure and how much it'll cost to ensure that. A lot of the times, the community health centers I've worked with can get, a few $1 million of Federal Tort Claims Act gap liability coverage for $10,000-$20,000 a year, which is pretty reasonable. One other big, really overlooked coverage that we recommend is spoilage coverage. You may have multiple locations or one big campus or older buildings with funky electrical outlets. Make sure your statement of values or your list of locations that say your building value and your business personal property is up to date, but keep vaccines and anything that's refrigerated in mind. A lot of these property policies will have a sublimit for contamination or spoilage or kind of a power outage type of coverage. So you want to make sure, A, you have coverage for spoilage, but also that it's enough so you don't have to replace, thousands and thousands of dollars of vaccines or medicines that need to be kept at a certain temperature, either cryopreserved or refrigerated. Another huge one is cyber liability insurance. That's something I'm very passionate about. If you obviously store patient records, use electronic health record systems, or accept online appointments or payments. I mean, cyber insurance is really a non-negotiable if you're in the healthcare space and community health center space. We've helped community health centers bring this cost down by partnering with their IT vendors and really getting in the weeds of their IT controls, making sure they're up to snuff and making them look the best to the underwriter's eye. Two quick tips on cyber insurance. If you have a policy, make sure your executive team has the 1-800-365 incident response hotline in their cell phones, because when these threat actors reveal themselves, if they're in your network, it's going to be, at the worst time possible, 2 a.m. on a Friday, a Memorial Day weekend, and you won't, have access to your cyber insurance policy. Another one is just be wary for sublimits. You may have a cyber crime sublimit. You may have a business interruption sublimit. So really have that cyber liability insurance reviewed in depth every single year. The last coverage tip, and we'll look at some carrier reviews, is management liability. Making sure you have all 4 different coverages. Employment practices liability, that's an HR person's best friend. Wrongful firing, wrongful hiring, harassment, sexual harassment, wage and hour disputes. Unfortunately, community health centers tend to have higher turnover than most businesses. It's a tough place to work, and if you're in healthcare. So making sure you have the adequate EPL, directors and officers liability. A lot are nonprofits and have boards, and you don't want your personal assets to be at risk if you're on the board of a community health center or a nonprofit. Making sure adequate directors and officers liability insurance is in place. Crime insurance, a handful of folks that have access to the crown jewels and the bank account, and potential grant money coming in. So want to make sure that exposure is taken care of, as well as fiduciary liability. All 4 management liability coverages bundled in. Some carriers we see really aggressive, right? The Doctors Company, Ironshore, MedPro for that Federal Tort Claims Act gap liability, that medical malpractice is friendly to nonprofits. On workers' comp, most community health centers we're seeing are best placed with a local regional carrier that understands claims in healthcare, like a UPMC, Work Partners, Erie, Eastern Alliance, Employers. They're all very competitive. Again, for property, Selective, Utica, Erie, lots of good options there. Creative things you could do. I've seen Nationwide offer some decent things to community health centers as well. We will do a full review on all of these carriers, so check that out if you want deeper insights. We'll link below in our YouTube channel. In the future, these FQHCs they're mission driven, but it doesn't mean insurance should be complicated. At Igloo Insurance here, we specialize in helping community health centers protect their teams and assets and patients. So if you want help reviewing your current program, visit us at iglooinsurance.com or reach out directly below. Thank you so much.